My name is Andrina Kelly. That was Jonah in the jacket. I decided I'm still a tech, so no jacket here. So I work for a company up in Canada called Bell Media. We are Canada's largest private broadcaster. We have something around 30 television stations and over 130 radio stations. We've just bought out another company, which means that we also now do advertising as well the bus shelters and things like that. So we're across Canada and a lot of fun to work for. So what we're going to talk about today, with regards to Stolen Machine, for our agenda, we're going to talk about a riveting tale of loss and sorrow. We're going to hold you in suspense while we try and figure out, how are we going to get this machine back? What's going to happen here? It's actually going to be better than a Sherlock Holmes story, so you're going to appreciate that. And then we're just going to, talk about how the whole thing worked out, and let's talk about what we did, what we would do differently, and what we do now. And also, there's going to be a couple little things which are going to be very small on the screen and you can't find, and so I've actually created a GitHub repository for everyone today. So I'm doing 2 sessions, and so there's one session on there called Stolen Machine, and that's where the couple things are from today. But first, talking about local, when I came down, this is my 3rd JNUC, and every other time I've flown down here, and it's been lovely, and I've really enjoyed Minneapolis. I think it's a great town. But I wanted to know a little bit more about Minnesota this year, and so when I came down here, we decided to drive. I had a friend running in the Chicago Marathon, so we spent the weekend in Chicago and came in from Chicago yesterday. And I was doing my research about my road trip and found out that Minnesota really likes roadside attractions. So much so that they actually go in for really big roadside attractions. And you might not know this, but they actually have the world's largest ear of corn, the world's largest otter, the world's largest twine ball. It's actually got its own little house and everything, so they've got this ball of twine in a house. It's great. And they have a Spam museum as well. Now, just to give you an idea, so these are some of the roadside attractions. This is not all. These are some of the Minnesota roadside attractions. You got the otter down there. But I think perhaps the best one, I haven't gone to see this yet, and I might need to before I go, but the best roadside attraction that I have seen advertised in Minnesota would be the double-story outhouse. It actually exists. Unfortunately, it's not actually functioning anymore, so you don't get to be the guy that's using the bottom. No, we don't want to go there. On with the story. So we got this email one day. I think my laptop's been stolen. You can see that awful sinking feeling. She'd taken it home the night before, had the kids trying to do grocery shopping. They're really, really very careful about locking the car, and they're very studious about these things. But, with all the groceries and the kids and all the other stuff that comes along with that, just so much to carry. And so they were really hoping that someone didn't take it, and you end up with this face of like, oh my God, what has happened, and where's my machine, and where's my stuff? And you feel violated. Your machine is gone. So there was a couple things that we knew when we got this email, and we were able to take a look. So we knew that the machine never made it home last night. We know it didn't get there. But we did also know that the machine was shut down before it left the office. We also knew that the machine was managed by Casper, which meant that the very first thing I decided to do, well, fine, if this machine is managed, it might show up one day. And so I went and created myself a nice little smart group. I've changed a few machine names and stuff here, so you don't have to know everything. But so I set up a smart group saying, if you happen to see the name of this machine checking in, giving me some sort of contact after this date and time, I want to know about it. Send me an email. So we did this. And we heard nothing. We decided to keep calm. Except that in our organization, we don't actually keep calm and carry on. We have a nice little logout screen for when we're installing applications. And our logout screen is actually to keep calm and install on. Yeah, it's kind of cute. The first time people saw that at work, they're like, what? And so we waited, and we waited. Now, if you remember that date from when the machine went missing, go back a bit here. So the date that it went missing on. Oh, too far, too far. There we go. So you can see the date there, the 19th of January, February, March, April. 19th of April is when the machine went missing. So eventually, we did actually get an email. I'm getting really click happy here, I'm sorry. All right, and you notice that the date on this email is actually June 20th. So we really did. It was almost a full month from when the machine went missing to the first time that our JSS came back to us and said, hey, machine's online. Okay, machine's online. I've now got an IP address. But what now? What do I do? So we knew the machine was alive. Good. This is interesting news. We've got a public IP address for its last location. The other curious thing that we know about this machine is the machine name has changed. So why is this machine that used to have our corporate name now called Diana's MacBook Pro? So these are all very curious things, and we started thinking about, well, wouldn't it be really nice if we had something more that we could do with this? Because we've filed a police report. Now we've got a public IP address. We can provide that to the police because we know that the public IP address is coming from an ISP. It's coming from a service provider. We can't gather any more information than that. We started thinking about, hey, wouldn't it be really nice if we had something like the Prey project installed on this machine? If you don't know about Prey, Prey is an open source software which you can go and track your stolen devices. It works for iOS. It works for your laptops. They've got an Android client as well, I think. And you can manage up to 3 machines for free. And so I started taking a look at this. And I found this little bit, and I shortened the URL for you, but they have a knowledge base article out there that if you wanted to use Prey with a bunch of machines and you wanted to be able to deploy it easily, they actually have a deployment installer. And so the deployment installer is actually all through command line as well, which was interesting. I was sort of thinking about, how could I do this in the future? And then I started thinking about, hang on, what if the future is now? What if I can do this? Because I can see this machine. Our JSS is open to the outside world. So the actual installer itself, it validates through an API key. And so the next time the machine is online, it'll show up in Prey once you've installed this and it's got your API. So this was an interesting and novel idea. I was like, well, why don't I just try this? So I logged into Prey, and it asked me how the weather was, because it's a very friendly little application. And once you've logged in, you notice that it's got your API key down there. Like, okay, so now I've got my API key, and so I can use this to go off and run the installer. And actually, all I needed to do was a one-liner in the run command of my policy. Now, obviously, you guys can all read that, right? Yeah. Okay, so we'll break down exactly how that runs out. So the one-liner that I put in is because I wanted this to go into somewhere where it was easily and freely available, I just, my very first bit was to cd into temp and curl down the installer. I figured curling it from their website rather than trying to deploy it from our internal stuff would be a lot safer, so that's why I chose to go this way. After curling it down, I unzipped it. Then changed the permissions so that I knew that it would be installable, and went and installed it. So it found my API key, verified it all, upgrade was successful. So now that I've got this sitting out there, my policy is ready and waiting to go. Now I have to wait for the machine to come back online again before it'll actually get installed. And so while we're waiting, let's talk a little bit more about these roadside attractions. So this is all of the roadside attractions in Minnesota. Want to go on a road trip? There's a lot of them. I wasn't kidding when I said there was a lot. And that photograph screen, there was, yeah. So after looking at this and thinking, hey, this is a lot of cool things to go see in Minnesota, which are still open and not shut down. What else out there would be really interesting if I was to do it in Ontario, where I'm from? These are all of the roadside attractions in Ontario. Just a few less, and you notice they're all along the border because we don't like the north. And so while you guys have a lot of the big things as well, you've got that, big otters and big balls of twine, where I'm from is an interesting big thing. And so I found out that we have the largest nickel. We have a really big snowman. But then I came across the best one, the most appropriate one. We have a really big apple. This is actually just down the road from where I live. I hadn't realized it was actually quite so magnificent, but yeah. To give you an idea, if I was to stand next to that, you see where the bottom shadow is? That's my height. That's a big apple. So we're still waiting, and then I got this notification from Prey telling me, hey, Dana's MacBook Pro is being registered. It's connected to the internet. That's June 24th. It was seen online. So that was a Monday. And I logged into Prey and said, my device is missing. Give me some information. So they sent me this very friendly email saying, oh, I'm so sorry, your machine has been lost. We're going to keep on tracking it, and the next time the machine comes online, we'll send you a notification. Monday, June 24th. We're all very excited in the office at this point because, hey, we're about to get some information about our machine. So it was the 24th. And then it was the 25th. And it was the 26th. We were waiting for that email to come. And the 27th rolled around. The 27th was a good day. We got an email. On that day, it says, good news. A report has come in from your missing laptop. And then we all flocked to a machine to go and say, hey, what information have we got in that report? And so it was a really interesting report. It gave us an idea of where is that laptop? Just down the road from our office, ironically. Also in the report, we got a photograph of who was using our machine. I may have covered up some faces for, because I'm nice. We got a screenshot of what they were looking at, because everybody needs to look at YouTube. We got a logged-in username. We knew how long the machine was up. We could see their active connections. We got a list of all of the Wi-Fi networks that were out there. This one I found really interesting. If you take a look at the slides for this afterwards, you'll see there's an awful lot of hotspots out there called Bell. Those are all the people that have gone and used the default name from the wireless router once it's been set up by their ISP. Yeah. And then I found something interesting just peering at that screenshot. They were logged in to Google. Yeah, it's a leftover from the Swedish reference if you're watching carefully. Well, you can't read that. It says Lisbeth Salander, so it's the name of the girl who was in the girl with the dragon tattoo. I'm like, well, if she's logged in to Google, that means that she might have saved some information on that machine. Stuff like in her keychain. What about in her browser history? Has she downloaded anything? What's she doing on this machine? We're very, I'm a curious type person that like to know what's going on. And so when poking into this, I'm like, well, what about dumping out the keychain and seeing what's in there? We can do this. Casper, when I run a policy from Casper, it runs as root, and so it's going to be able to pull out any information. And so as a little one-liner, I ran out a security dump keychain, just in the run command. And so to give you an idea, if I was to run that on my machine, you can see, and it brings out things like it brings out my MobileMe account is there. Ooh, okay. So it shows you that what my MobileMe account username is and things that I've logged into in my keychain. So that was interesting. I can also dump out whatever she's looked at in her Safari plist, the Safari history. Again, you just convert the plist from XML into binary, from binary into XML, and then you can just take a look and see what's in that history. And so when I was taking a look at the history, you can then open it up and see that, yes, indeed, they were looking at that YouTube video, and it was the drop test between the Samsung Galaxy and the iPhone. I think we all know who won that one. The other interesting thing that we found going through all this is all of the Facebook links, because they were very active on Facebook, and so it meant that you could see all the Facebook links to all of their friends and all of their friends' open profiles. And so you start to build like little social network of who is this person and where are they connected to and where are they from. And then also things like, how crazy is it? Nature made that. And the person who was trapped on an escalator for hours. Stairs. It's hard doing stairs. And so then once we've gone through and looked and built a little bit more of a profile on this person, we can also go and see what they've downloaded. So again, exactly the same thing, converting it from binary into XML, taking a look at that actual plist file. And that will pull out exactly, what it is that they've gone and downloaded, where they downloaded it from. It's pretty cool. But of course, there's more. So in pulling out all this information, the one that I was really putting my bets on and really hoping I'd get some good information from was that keychain. I really thought with the keychain, I'd get an idea of exactly what their Google ID was, see what they'd be able to log in as, and this is all information we could then hand back to the police and go, you can really verify who this person is. Unfortunately, they weren't clicking the box for save my password. There was just nothing coming back in that keychain. And so I figured, there's got to be a different way of finding out that information if they're logging in, right? So what about a keylogger? I can hear the laughter from back there. That's cute. This is our machine. They've taken it from us. I feel validated doing this. And in fact, after presenting this in Sweden, I've spoken to some other administrators who actually run this on their own personal machines all the time. And they do this because they've got a desktop machine and they want it sat there and they want to know if somebody else has come along and used their machine, which I'm not one of those administrators, but it's an interesting concept. And so when I started reading into this, it's handily deployed as a nice package file. And so it meant it was going to be really easy to install. And so then I started playing with it and figuring out how I was going to do this and took a look at it. And it's all command line. And so you go and run the binary, and it asks you for a password, which is it's the default password that comes with the binary. And then once you've given it that password, it then gives you a prompt. And so the prompt that you can put in is just to print out everything that has been cached into the keylogger's memory. So to give you an idea, when I was creating this presentation, this is what my keylogger looked like. Oh, and Facebook links. And there I was doing a paste. And so that was really interesting. And so then I was like, well, hang on, I'm having to actually type these commands into my terminal. It's all very interactive, and this machine is, somewhere off a highway down the road, and I can't get in because, it's been stolen. So then I had to come up with, well, okay, I can install a package, that's easy, but then I actually need to run this binary. How am I going to do that? And that's where my best friend expect came along. And so this is all just put into a nice little bash script, and I'm using expect. So expect is one of those things that does exactly like it sounds, is expecting stuff. And so you go off and spawn the binary that you want to run, and then tell it to expect something that looks like password. So if you remember, the very first thing that happened when I told it to go off and run the logtext was that it asked me for the password. So good. We're expecting the password, and we tell it, go put in this default password and hit return. And then the next thing it asked me for was, OK, well, what do you want to do? And so the thing that we did then to get the log out was tell it to go print and send return. And that, of course, then returns back to the client. And once we've got that information, we can just quit. I'm too far away. There we go. And send return. And that's the end of our expect. Excellent. And so now I've got my policy all set up. I've tested it out on another machine. I know this is going to collect all sorts of really good information for me. But I need to wait for the policy to run. They're not frequently using this laptop. This is about a week's time that I've been gathering this bit of covert information from them. And so we sit and wait. And so I thought while we were sitting and waiting, given that it was a beaver that had apparently stolen our machine, that we should go do some research on some beavers, right? And so this is what I found.
Canadian, please. Ooh, Mr. Canadian. Mr. Canuck. Where's your pet beaver? Right here. Attack. I am Canadian.
Because in Canada, we don't actually watch cat videos on YouTube. We watch beer commercials. This is what we do. And so we're waiting, and then I got an email. And they say, thanks. Please just return my laptop to me. And I never got to find out what the keylogger told me anything because now the laptop's back in our hands. But it was a really good exercise in using expect. So I highly recommend that. But now we've got this laptop back, and I'm still really curious. I mean, this laptop got out there in the world, and somehow it got its name changed. Do they have our admin password? Why did they change the name? What happened here? And so it was time to do a little bit of forensics on this machine. And so at this point, it was a matter of, what do the logs say? Come on, you must know that. Yeah, OK, good. So we know that the user shut down their machine. And it was reported stolen on April 19th. This was reported to police. We knew about it. This is when we set up our policy saying, alert me when this machine comes online. And we could see some login attempts from April 19th in the logs as well. Now, they were very curious. They're trying to log in as a default user as www. I can understand that one. They also tried to use the username beaches. Still can't explain that one. There was a login attempt a couple days later for the username user. They were very creative about this. And then it showed a shutdown, followed by a startup with the Apple Setup Assistant running. Aha. This is starting to all fall into place here. I think I'm understanding what happened. The next login was for a brand new user that I'd never heard of, and it was successful. Raise your hand if you think you know what happened here. Excellent, smart people. Well done. So can we reproduce this? Can we create a situation where we have a machine in our hands that we don't know how to log into, and we can change the machine name and create a new user? So let's try a reconstruction here. I had a hypothesis about this, and so let's see what happens. Handy dandy recovery partition, right? Let's boot into that recovery partition. And suddenly we've got terminal access. Aha. One file. Just needed to delete that .apple setup done. What happens when you do that? And you reboot the machine? Setup assistant, exactly. And so when you get the setup assistant, it asks you, what's your name? What do you want to call the machine? Create your first login. And so that's what happened. Someone had been Googling, or they took it to a Mac repair store and managed to spin the right story. But that's how our machine got compromised. And so that led to a really interesting conversation in the office, as I'm sure you can imagine. So there's this whole scale of, well, the machine was out there. It was, there was a password on it. There was a different admin account. And we actually managed to recover the machine. So these are all plus things, right? On the other hand, the machine was out there. Our users' personal data was on it, as well as a bunch of corporate data. And the machine was out there with that data on it. And it wasn't necessarily all that well secured. And so that led to the conversation of, well, what's more important to us? Is our data more important, or is the recovery of the machine more important? And as interesting as it was, and as cool as it was to be able to get this machine back from the police, and there was a lot of people who were very impressed in our organization that this actually happened, the result of that conversation came down to, we're going to secure the machines. So we're now using File Vault on all of our machines, all of our portable machines. And it does mean that this whole process is not going to work for us in the future, because any machine that gets shut down and sent out into the wild, when that gets turned on again, nobody else is going to be able to get in there, and it's not going to allow us to have this recoverability. And so if you're in a place where the actual hardware is slightly more important than the data on the machine, then of course this would be a fantastic idea for you. But this is where we start to get into a little bit of a conversation about this and start to see, which way is the best way to go, and what do you like and what do you not like. Now, I know a bunch of you have had your machines go missing, and some of you have had them returned. So I'd like to hear from some of you about, and I will repeat it because I know we're in a big room and I don't see microphones out here, about how you got your machine back and whether you did something like this to get it back, and what you would say would be the best way for your organization to go forward with this. Down at the front here, black shirt.
I work for a school system.
Give us 1 second. We have a microphone.
I work for a school system, a lot of students. We have a one-to-one program from 8th grade up. So we're looking at about 500 devices, and that's not including our staff. And invariably we'll lose 2 to 3 devices a year. due to being stolen, left on buses. Generally, they're left on buses, real easy to recover. They get it back. We did track one down to New Jersey doing a reverse trace on the IP. One of the big problems we ran into was that the people would wipe the machines. So Casper Suite's pretty much gone at that point. You can't really do much with that. Good lesson learned, though, is if you set the open firmware password, and if anybody's got an easy way of doing that rather than trying to touch each device, I'd love to come up with an automated way of doing that, because touching about 400 computers and laptops, setting open firmware, it's a long time.
Yeah, that gets painful. Well, the other interesting conversation that we had the last time I delivered this presentation was actually for someone in a very similar situation, that they were doing the K to 12 work. And the conversation that came up was they're like, well, they're students. Why would we care about securing their laptops? And then I challenged that and said, well, yes, they're students. And students don't necessarily recognize that when they're logging into Facebook and that's their machine, they're kind of giving away a whole bunch of their life. Like, they might be a bit more careless with where they live, who their friends are, what they're doing that day, how someone can find them. And so the big question was, well, should we be file vaulting student laptops as well as corporate laptops? Because isn't that data just as important as corporate private data? So it was a very interesting question, and a lot of debate happened over that, and so I'm trying to encourage that here too. There was another conversation from the white shirt.
I also work in a school. We have about 1,068 laptops from grades 4 through 12. I work at the middle school, grades 4 through 8. And we had a machine go missing. A student came into the tech center and basically said, I can't find my laptop. It's been a couple hours. It's not in my locker. I retraced my steps. I can't find it. So we used Casper. Luckily, the machine was still on and reporting in. It was connected to an IP inside the school. And so I used ARD, remoted in, and it was on. It was being used. And then a great debate arose amongst us. Well, to turn on the webcam and see who's using it. And we're like, nah, that'd be probably not the best idea. There was a whole tech department that got fired because of that. So we decided to go another route. So what we did was we used ARD to send a Unix command to send the volume all the way up to 10, and then say, I'm lost, please report me to the tech center, and just kept hitting Command V and Enter, Command V and Enter, Command V and Enter until it eventually showed up. And some student was who had lost their computing rights because they were abusing the computer, had stolen someone else's machine, and was using that instead. So.
All right, excellent story. I like if you haven't come across the say command in Unix, that's a really fun one, especially if you live in a household where there's other people and you can SSH into their machines and start their machine talking to them. It's never happened in our house, never, no. Is there anyone else who'd like to share a story down in the front center?
I'm not coming up there, sorry.
You can shout.
I actually just had this happen yesterday. I also work in a school district. What had happened is a student left their backpack somewhere, and they couldn't find their MacBook after that. So they talked to the library media specialist, and they contacted IT. And by doing so, we were able to look in Casper what the last IP address was, what the MAC address is, the student that it was applied to. And I'm more of a PC guy. I'm kind of turning my ways, I guess you could
We
say.
welcome
Almost.
you.
So I took that. We use Cisco switches.
Yeah.
So we have a Cisco infrastructure. And with Cisco, there's a thing called Cisco Prime. And I was able to take the MAC address and track it through Cisco Prime, which kind of like Prey does, but it's more internal. So as soon as it came back on an access point in any of the classrooms, it said exactly which access point it came back online with. So we were able to say, well, it's back in there. What had happened is the student's little brother took it from on Friday night, and the student never told us. And so I was looking for it yesterday, and it was a good situation. It was never stolen. The kid just never told us.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like Prey does, but a little more internal.
No, actually, it's an excellent idea, especially
And as soon as
if
it comes back online, it sends me an email too.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Yep, using your Cisco infrastructures, and I'm sure that there's other network providers that do something very similar, but that's an excellent idea. There was over here. Jonah, we're going to make Jonah run.
So the part that was interesting to me was the recovery of the data of the device.
If you want to hold the microphone just a little
Yeah,
bit.
I had a laptop stolen out of my luggage, just a short trip, disappeared for about 6 months. It was encrypted. I wasn't worried about the data. 10.8.2 came out. Next morning, find my Mac. Ellen's MacBook Pro has been found. Turns out it had been wiped, and something about 10.8.2 allowed it to be found. So 10.8.2 got released, the guy updated the firmware, and it was found online. Turns out it was a lawyer who bought it off of Craigslist, went through a big legal process. He opened up a police report. He's got a case ongoing, actually as we speak, and this is a year and a half later.
Wow.
So I got the machine back after about 9 months. But yeah, for us, it's all about the data, right? So we have personally identifiable information. So the most important part to me is getting a wipe confirmation. Other than that, it'd be nice to get the machine back, but as long as we can verify that the data's wiped, that's what's important.
Yeah, that's actually is very interesting because the people, once the police went and knocked on the door of the beaver and the moose, they actually said, well, we bought it off of a street corner for $200. I want to know where that street corner is so I can go off and buy all of my laptops for $200. But yeah, no, it was very interesting. Just, there's obviously a hot market. And once you can display a machine to someone and say, look, the Apple setup system, it's a brand new machine. You want to buy this? I can kind of see how that, if you're not one of us, I can see how you could be sold by that. So it's a very interesting conundrum. And I should also mention, now that I am discussing File Vault, Rich Troughton has a really good session that he'll be presenting File Vault 2 here as well. So if you're not already using File Vault on your machines and you want to be able to know how to implement this across all your machines, go to that session. It's absolutely invaluable. And we got another one at the back here.
Hi. I also work for a big K-12 school. We've got about 3,500 one-to-one devices, grade 8 through 12. We actually go a little bit different route. We actually don't put the recovery partition on our students' computers, but there are still ways to run, if you can get it into single user, you can still remove that setup. So what we've done, since we can't do the remote wipe the same way without that hard drive or without the recovery partition, we've created a script and a set of configuration profiles that we push out that basically turns the computer into a brick. It will continuously restart it, restart it, restart it. We cache it for offline. That way the files are still there. We can still lock it down. And basically the only thing that it looks for is a IP address change. So once it plugs into our hardwired network is the only one that it says, when you see this, don't restart. So it literally has to be plugged into one of our places internally, and if it does that, we use some back-end stuff to go find it.
Awesome. And so you've put that all out as a CASPER policy? Yep. Awesome. So there's going to be a discussion for this session. If you wouldn't mind, if you're able to post up exactly like the policy that you've done, that would be really cool to share with everyone here. Awesome. And I know that there was another hand just over here.
Yeah, another K-12. In our case, what had happened is during the summer when we were kind of redoing a bunch of our iPads, 7 of our Apple configurator sync stations got stolen after someone broke a window in our media center and ran away with that and 50 iPads. So yeah, fun times. So what we did though is, a few of them did start checking back into to the JSS, and after catching some of the IP address info and enabling the geolocation field to start reporting back in, we started giving a lot of that to the police, and they subpoenaed the ISPs.
Yep.
And then after that, we didn't recover everything. We did recover 1 of the MacBooks and about 5 of the iPads. And same thing, it was off someone, well, I got it from this guy on Craigslist, and he sold me these 5 iPads and a MacBook for $700. I'm like, well, hey, it's a hell of a deal.
Do you think there's something wrong with that?
The rest of them, unfortunately, actually, a lot of our kind of assembly blocks, we had this information continuously coming in, but the subpoenas with the ISPs took so long, and every time there was new information or a new IP address or a new SSID, we had to submit a new subpoena, and it was taking a long time for subpoenas to get back to the police department, and eventually we kind of had to cut our losses on a bunch of them.
Interesting. So that's obviously a difference in case between the Canadian police and the US police, because our police actually just kind of took care of all of that, and we gave them IP address and off they went. So from the time of reporting, like giving them the actual prey information, reporting that, to when we got the machine back, we were looking at about a week's time. So Yeah, I know. We've got another one in the back center. Jonah, keep running. Oh, well, we just need everyone to be able to hear us, so it's all right.
Sorry.
It's good for Jonah.
Crawl over you. Yeah, I need my exercise today.
I was wondering what kind of guidance the police actually gave, because it seemed as you were going through, well, I could do this and I could do this, and you could keep going, and then at some point it kind of feels like, well, yeah, they shot first, so this is okay, but you know. Did they give any kind of guidance or any of these other situations? I'm just kind of curious. I hadn't gone through this before.
We were fully aware of what we were doing. Like, we were actually thinking about it and saying, well, hang on, this is our laptop, and we know that it is somewhere that it shouldn't be, and we have reported this to the police. So with things like, the Keylogger and stuff like that, we actively had an open case with the police. We were providing all this information to them. Never at one point did they say, actually, hey, you're getting a little too deep there. In fact, what they were saying was, thank you, this is all very valuable information. And so I would be, things like Prey and stuff like that, we do not install that by default on any machine. The only time that ever gets installed is if a machine's gone missing. And I mean, it's not going to be a case now that we've got File Vault down unless someone picks up an iMac and takes it off with them. But yeah, I mean, it was certainly something we were very conscious of, and I have a feeling we probably would have approached it very differently if our first Prey screenshot had come back and it had been like, an obviously a 6-year-old kid or something using it. I think we probably would have approached it very differently then. But yeah, no, we were never told, hey, back off. Was there anyone, we got someone right over here. I got you.
You did that on purpose, didn't you?
Absolutely. About the conversation about just what you can pull and working with the police, we actually had a case that's still ongoing. Started about 2 years ago. It was a teacher's laptop that was stolen. And we did much that same thing where we were pulling the Facebook. We would, every night, every time to come online, it would pull the Facebook, the Safari history. We'd also grab the Firefox profile because they were both being used and download them, so that we could rip it apart and see where they were going. And the detective on the case said that was one of the most helpful things that they had, because when he did the knock and talk at the door, he was actually able to disarm the person by mentioning all of their friends' names before actually then, oh, so you must be John Doe. And that was really interesting. It's been 2 years, and with the working the police, we were actually stumbled into this laptop was stolen as apparently part of a larger ring of stolen laptops in the area. So we actually were able to get court orders along the way to say, grab this info, grab this info, grab this info, to the point where we were turning the camera on and grabbing surrounding information and everything because we had warrants to get that information.
Which is something else I would mention, is that you actually can't turn off that little green light on the camera.
Right.
And so every time I was taking a photograph of these people, every 15 minutes, the green light would come on, take a photograph, and they'd keep on using it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as far as that, working with the police, was really good for us. We're gonna have the additional fun of finding out that we still haven't gotten this laptop back now for just shy of 3 years, because it is actually going to trial.
Wow.
They're doing a full trial, and it's one of the pieces of evidence along with all of our logs and information. So we have more fun to come.
When you do get the laptop back, you know about the trade-in program, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what it's going to be at this point. Yeah.
Awesome. And we had over here. Was that, sorry, for me or for over there?
That's what scripts are for. It comes in and I just forward it to the detective. So really not a whole lot of time on our part. It's hours, days.
Once you have your scripts up and running, they're just on a policy. And so you write your policy once, and then it just keeps on delivering information to you.
And we've reused that, so I mean, that was an investment of time anyways. So it's just like, why I'm sitting here watching this presentation? It's
We actually...
information that you're going to be able to reuse, just keep carrying it forward.
And it sounds like, what we actually ended up doing is having a whole group within our policies now, which are purely for theft and recovery. I can see you up there. I'll come back to you. I just know you've got a question over here first.
So not a school, a corporate environment, so a little bit different story. I was away, and I was the backup Mac administrator, and the primary one was fired. They collected all of his equipment and walked him out the door. Was away on vacation, and suddenly I'm all the emails that the JSS spits out stopped happening. So I had, someone in the office go look at the server. The hard drive had been completely wiped. Oh, and his laptop went missing. And unfortunately, the sort of pitfall of File Vault is if someone turns on File Vault because they're savvy enough, and you need to get to that machine to find any evidence, which we later found on a different machine, it turns out to be his roommate who was also an employee. Once you turn File Vault on and you don't have the recovery key, that's it. Apple doesn't have like a master key to unlock it. So if you get back a machine that you need evidence that could contain evidence, that's one of the pitfalls.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I've certainly heard discussions like police investigations where they recover a laptop and again it is encrypted, and then, well, what are you gonna do? You kind of, until you tell the person to give me your File Vault key, you're a little bit stuck. Yeah, I know that Rich actually talks about how to deploy enterprise-wide File Vault encryption as well. So maybe that's just a proactive thing. If you actually deploy the enterprise File Vault encryption, then you've got the keys. Right. So the session that I'm giving tomorrow afternoon is all about how to give your users only temporary admin so you know what's going on. So maybe that might have been a solution for that as well. Maybe not with an administrator, but. And I know that there was someone who's going to have to shout at us from up there.
Yeah, I don't know if you can, but I worked at the University of Sweden, and we had almost exactly the same experience like you had with the PD data or anything like that. But what happened was that we got some ramifications from the code. We got the users back and everything like that. But then the teachers and the scientists and whatever at the university started protesting that, well, you can do this without using software knowledge, you don't do it all the time. Which became a huge issue. I think they have to write a new university policy kind of guarantee that you were doing that with
So to wrap up for people who might not have heard, there was after recovering a machine and people finding out how the recovery was done, there were some questions from the staff at his university in Sweden. If you can do this, how do we not know that you're not doing this all the time? And I guess that, as you said, you come down to university policy to say, hey, this is acceptable use. And so I know a lot of places have acceptable use for their end users. I've seen a few places that have acceptable administration for their administrators as well. So, you shall not spy on the staff when you're just trying to kill some time. And so that's, we tend to police ourselves pretty carefully on that. Like, we don't have these sorts of things installed as a general rule. They only get turned on one machine at a time when it's an absolutely required process, and we can, of course, print out reports from our JSS to prove that as well. So it's an interesting side to think of things. How are we doing for time, Jonah?
We got about 7 minutes left.
7 minutes. Who's got the 7-minute question or comment? Who's eager to go for lunch? Who's fallen asleep? Oh, we got one right down at the front here.
Hi, so we're another corporate environment, but we're global. So we've got like 20 different offices split around the world. London, Hong Kong, Bangkok, Shenzhen, Manhattan. So the difficulty comes when you want to track a machine, going for the territories. As it's a clothing company, the IP is the big thing. So we've looked at this, we are interested in it, obviously I'm here, but essentially we just hit that lovely remote wipe button and wait for the confirmation, and then we know that we're happy, because it's going to be difficult, as you guys have been saying, it's difficult to get the authorities to assist you, especially if we're trying to recover a laptop that's been stolen in Vietnam. We're going to have some different difficulties, maybe different rule set we're allowed to follow than we were if it was another country.
Yeah, the remote wipe was something that we actually looked at as well. When a machine came back up online, and of course it was managed, and we had the configuration management on there as well, and we're like, well, we could just hit remote wipe, but as soon as you do that, you lose all contact with the machine. You don't have anything. And of course, the other thing that needs to happen for the remote wipe to happen is the machine has to be online. And so I would be very nervous in your case as well, especially if you're worried about personal knowledge that's on that machine, IP, is that the machine has to come online. So what if the machine never comes online and they just keep it offline and they can access your IP? It's a tough one to try and navigate there. We have one more over here.
Hey, Andrew from Code 42 Crash Plan. So it would be I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say if you run backup on these things, then the information is really the only thing that matters. The industry accepted kind of cost for a lost laptop is between $30,000 and $40,000. That's just the information on there, which is significantly more than the laptop. And we comply with probably 20 to 30 police requests to do reverse IP lookups of just our consumer cloud users, just to try and track those things down. So interesting tidbits for you guys.
That's awesome. Thanks. And do we have anything else before we break for lunch? Ooh, all right, everyone's coming up now. I'm going to send Jonah running that way, and I'm going to get you to talk up there.
Yeah, I just had a question for the president. I know some computing software offers some location-based stuff. Is that something they're looking at integrating into their enterprise solutions? Is it there now? You run your master server out, so it's publicly accessible?
You heard the answer? Cool.
Just a quick question to the group. Has anybody manipulated the restore image so that would automatically cause a Casper enroll if they ran it and then hide the Casper version so the end user wouldn't be able to see? So it would automatically, if somebody should boot it up to the restore bootset and run that. Has anybody tried anything like that? Just sort of.
I know that some people have tried meddling with that restore partition, and I would say it's not supported. Yes, it's not supported, and
we do a lot,
yeah,
but
just
it's not supported.
and.
Yeah, but
There's a couple other things you can do in that restore partition, though, as well as just bringing down the restore. You notice those are little apps that are in that restore partition, and so the question is, how do you get the Casper imaging as one of those apps? And again, I would have to say it is not supported.
Come up with a workflow and post it.
Have a look. I know that discussion has come up in Jamf Nation, and maybe poke around there and see what the answers were. But I think we need to wrap this up now. So I'd like to thank Jonah for inviting me out here, and thank you, all of you, for coming and watching this, and it was been great. Thank you.